Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're doing well out there, wherever you are. Whatever time of the day it is, this beautiful afternoon here in wonderful Taos, New Mexico.
Good afternoon to my lovely spiritual family. As always, we send our love and blessings to all who are tuning in to another webinar from us.
Here we are to talk about assemblage points of reverence. Reverence is a beautiful state of being that's most naturally gifted at attracting love unto you and care space that can be very divine in succulent living. We're going to push you into that assemblage point today so you can feel the care and love of spirit that sometimes is kind of vacant in the emerging changes of the polarities of humanity. We can just say that the pole changes is reversing people sometimes from light to dark, or light to medium, or medium to dark, or medium to light, or dark to light, and that may be a very severe personal change. And those who were less aware foresees you don't change from light to anything. Your light always, and it's important to remember that in this current time frame of what's occurring for humanity. Light is light, and light fosters way, and light illuminates the body in the field. And in time, perhaps you begin to see those that look a little grungy in the energy systems around them. Those may be people to avoid, or businesses to avoid, or something else to avoid in your life. If it shows up in the grocery store, the mall, or around clothing that we would think of buying, I wouldn't buy that if I were you. Long ago, we talked about how clothing has incantations behind it. And the incantations can be useful to light motion. But many are not, because there can be incantation of hell or hell beings or disease or darkness over clothing as is manufactured. Wherever they sew it up in the east or the west, or wherever they are producing these ensembles of even finery in clothing. When you go to the mall to shop for clothing, or even online, you want to assess whether the garment can motion light or not. Because if you're going to assemblage point reverse into reverence, if your clothing doesn't motion light, spirit may not stay very long near you, because it reflects the body's ability to motion light, which affects spirit's capacity to sway with you. And if it can't sway with you, it just kind of flies off in another direction. So it's important, if you're going to really learn to sway with spirit and feel that care space as a star seed, to learn to find clothing that actually refracts light. Some fabrics do and others don't. Generally, fabrics that do are oriented towards natural fibers of some sort, whether it's a rayon or some kind of bark or cotton. Often synthetic fabrics can't motion light, so it's best to stay away from those anyway if you want to light infuse. As a vegan, Asarana doesn't wear silk. However, for those who are comfortable wearing silk, silk almost always light infuses. Therefore, if you find something made of silk, it's a good thing to wear if you're really desiring to be in a state of reverence, perhaps for a sacred moment in your life, such as a wedding or such as something beautiful that you want to cherish for that moment of your life. Other garments will too almost as profusely, and you see it on the rack if you close your eyes, if the light is streaming up okay. If you're good at vision as a psychic, you see whether the light is motioning up or motioning down, but you can also muscle test because your body will know that it can motion light or not. Even out of the garments that may motion light, some may or may not be suited to who you are in relation to its incantation. The garments still hitting the marketplace is Shatar oriented, and everything in Shatar has an incantation behind it. We'll give you an example of this peach top that Asarana is wearing today that has an incantation to be divine, and in the reverence of spirit, and in the love of all that is, in everything you can sway with, the days you wear this garment, and that has a Shatar incantation. There are those types of garments out there, and you have to be selective in what you buy, and then it may be much more beautiful to wear. And you feel beautiful within you, and beautiful with those that you dance with, beautiful in this way of yourself, and swing better if the garments that you're wearing can light infuse. The same is true for your home. If you want to attract spirit, if you want to bring a state of reverence into your home, then you need to have things in your home that motion light. Asarana and Pear got very selective about the furnishings they put together for this particular house. They got only things that would motion light, and their altar already motion light, and hand selected those things over the years, and so the house would sway and emotion and caress and be beautiful. And if nothing else, sometimes filling the house with more plants, you will achieve that goal too without redecorating. So if your house doesn't sway and rock and roll in light, add more plants until you get the motion of the airstream of spirit, so more spirit can descend to be with you in the dreams that you're dreaming each day of your life ahead. It's a beautiful thing to light infuse in reverence. There's many points of assemblage point for light infusion. We haven't talked about any of them, but one of the most beautiful assemblage points to light infuse is assemblage point of reverence, because it's all about deep care of spirit into matter, deep care of you as a human back to a spirit in a state of blessing that is a sacred blessing with an incantation, all of its own from Baba for you to think about. And the incantation is, I am that I am, a sacred instrument of reverence, of spirit and myself in spirit, and thou and tau of itself, and thou and tau of myself, and thou and tau of the planet. I am that I am, beautiful in a state of reverence. Often, if you came for a light infusion with Asarana prior to an event in DAS or Dreamtime Ascension School, they would put you in that incantation so you could feel the reverence Spirit had for you while you laid on this massage table and infused in light. Infusing in a state of reverence is pure pink energy of heart space of the Baba. It has always been so on this planet that pink was considered the ray of deep care for spirit into matter, and matter for spirit. And it won't really ever change, although some anthologies prefer light blue. When Asarana infuses, she would sometimes adjust it to be blue for a time and then back to pink because different spirits were attracted to pink versus blue. Blue attracts angels and pink attracts Baba, or care space resources of forces that can be quite unique in how they appear. They might appear like a Buddha, or they might appear like a Kuan Yin, or they might appear as some other force of reverence, even Jesus, for those that need that image. They appear as you need it, and not necessarily anybody else. It could be Mohammed or any other force that has been here through time, including Babaji or even Sai Baba, if you loved him. Mother Teresa would show up sometimes in Asarana's light infusion to explain things, especially to elderly people that needed to understand crossing. There are many other resources, perhaps without names, that are very caring in their stature of reality. One is known as Emmanuel. Emmanuel translates into reverence, and the spirits of Emmanuel may appear as many images, sometimes more than one at once. That's because they know that your ancestry understands something from a point of reference, of either Jesus or Buddha or Kuan Yin, or something else that you have looked at in your time in your metaphysical studies. And to you, that resource was a place of reverence in your heart. You can't explain it, but you just revere them, and sometimes people revere angels quite heavily. Asarana recalls one associate early on when she was living in Honolulu who had angels all over her house, in cards and paintings and statues and fabric on the couch. It was almost nauseating to look at, but she had recovered from cancer, and that to her was her point of reverence, so that she would remain in that and remain cancer-free. And so for her, she needed to have images in every corner of the room to remind her to be angelic, and some people are like that. So the things that you hang around the house or put around the house, if they make you recall reverence, they're a good thing to decorate. Pear has a beautiful teak statue of Buddha, and that's one of his pieces that remind him to be in reverence. There are several others, but that one is the most poignant for him, where it came to him at a time that he was having problems blossoming in the lotus pattern. And the lotus pattern would come through the statue for about 9 weeks, so he could master it easily. It was always there to talk to him, and this little face would open up. That was a Tao of Nemesis who was watching over Pear. He would tell Pear different things over the course of the day, and sometimes laugh at him or make him laugh about himself, and that was useful to him too. The statue still talks, believe it or not, after all this time, and Pear thinks that's really funny where we come through, and that's really funny when we come through and tell him to get him going because there's a webinar to turn on soon, or whatever else we may tell him to get his day going. So we love as spirits do different things, and usually we will be most likely to communicate through objects that you feel reverence for within yourself whenever you engage with them. And that can include sacred instruments. Asarana has assembled her rattles and her other feathers and other things that are native, that are a point of reverence, but not a point of reverence in and of itself. So here we'll distinguish what reverence is as, say, an object you put in the home versus a point of reverence when you look at it says, "Oh, be sacred." So her sacred objects remind her to be sacred. Pear's Buddha reminds him to be reverent. And in the reverence, Asarana and Pear align better with spirit and remember to bless them. Then pure care space opens up and they feel great. Their house fills up with pink and sometimes a little blue too if some angels show up, and then everything's better. Whatever they've been diffusing falls off clunk, 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 and all of a sudden the airstream of their beautiful home has shifted assemblage points too. So the assemblage point of reverence is a temple, and it's the only assemblage point that can be associated with the church or your home if you choose to turn your home into a church or a healing center for those of you that want to create a healing center in your home. Whether you heal other people or not doesn't matter. It's for the healing of you. So turning your home into a reverent place of a church is one way to turn it into a divine service care space where spirit and matter join you and bless you and work through you in whatever your focus is for the day. Now that point of reverence may or may not work out in other workplaces unless you choose for that inside you. So if you find a little Buddha statue or a statue of Ganesh or Kuan Yin statue or something that reminds you to be reverent, maybe you put it by your desk at the office, and every time you look at it and say, "Oh yeah, let's be reverent to bless these people that are having strife in the workplace or whatever is going on that perhaps isn't well for them either." Some days it may work and other days it may not, but it's probably not a bad idea, although people might make odd comments about it if they don't understand your spiritual point of view. And so points of reverence emulate that reverence inside the little statue. Often the statues coming from Vietnam, India, or Thailand, or sometimes even China, when these artisans carve them, They carve them in reverence if they believe reverently about the unique appearance of the statue that they happen to be carving. So if they believe in reverence, then it's a reverent statue and you feel it in usually a lotus blossom of light that shows up in the statue. That's a blessing from Spirit for the reverent artisan that chose to create that image in the statue. It can also occur in paintings. An affiliate of ours is a very talented artist who created the beautiful paintings that he offered up in the light-infused state of himself that had different points of motion that are all part of light flowering. He built it into the pictures and then they went up on his website and continued to flower. Capturing flowers within images is also possible and is always best to try to get the original and not necessarily a print, because rarely can a print hold on to the image much like the original does. That can be true for painted garments that are hand-dyed or hand-organized, and if they're painted in reverence, then the garment can have a real sheen to it and hold that reverent persona almost in it as you don it to wear it for a moment of reverence of yourself. That is just the nature of the artisan put into the garment when they painted it that felt reverent in that moment and that transferred with a little gift from Spirit into matter that, oh, this is a sacred garment to don to be reverent. In the Tibetan culture, this can show up maybe more frequently than anywhere else because of the ashram interest in reverence in Tibet, Mongolia, and Nepal. If you get to a Tibetan store, if you're lucky to see it out in the marketplace, you look and you see more reverent items in that little shop or in that market stall than perhaps any other place in town or in the fair. So it is, even when you go to consider what it is out of those reverent energies that you need, always to tune it to your own flower patterns of light and make sure it aligns. And if it doesn't, go for another piece. You can muscle test that for yourself as you do because you want the reverent items that you bring to your house to flower like you and not like someone else, or it's not as powerful of a presence to have in your home to create a church of yourself or a sacred sanctuary of yourself as another way of looking at it. Church for Spirit means point of reference, and of course they adopted that in the Christian thinking and even in the Muslim thinking with their round temples. There's a sense of reverence within it that is really beautiful if you understood the motions and could assemble them in yourself and then motion into the assemblage point of reference and be there with the priest, whoever he is, to feel that. It's also true in the Jewish shalom. Shalom is another word for reverence. And for Jewish people who have been trained in shalom on some level, when you say shalom, all of a sudden they become reverent. There are things in the Jewish history that are also points of reverence, and one of them is their sacred candle holder that has like 7 tall candles in it that they would do a ceremony over. That candle labra and the 7 candles represent reverence in a shalom sense of deep care. You can adopt these things too if you think they're beautiful and adorn your altar with something that puts you in the perfect point of altering your assemblage point into a state of reverence. There are places that feel reverent, and some churches, even Buddhist monastery type churches, and even Japanese churches that were quite prevalent in Hawaii, can feel very reverent when you enter them. It's always best to do whatever the tradition is and honor the reverence of it and enjoy the flower motions and be present in it. And then as you leave, bless whoever holds that space for each to encounter. There may be other places that hold reverence in the human condition that are points of focus of yogis. So there's some places that build churches or gardens or something sacred that is there that is a point of yogi understanding of reverence. Now, Asarana remembers one which was this giant Buddha statue in Kapahula on Maui, Hawaii. There was a little house underneath, and somebody that believed in the reverence of a particular yogi would give out literature, blessings, or wherever it was for whoever they were. Asarana wasn't into yogis at that time and went by that place and saw all the Tibetan flags and everything around it and thought to herself, well, isn't that interesting? Then she witnessed it like taking points of dock out of the island and motioning them away through major gates associated with Haleakala volcano. And she was able to undo a whole bunch of patterns in her prior to an event in associating with that little point of big reverence of some yogi somewhere that she never met. Asarana doesn't worship, and you should neither, but people like to worship yogis and priests and whoever else they believe in. Worship isn't reverence, because in reverence there's a natural equality. Worship says, I'm subordinate to you, heal me, fix me, make me better, and then I'll keep worshiping you. And if there are too many worshiping you outside of a state of reverence, it can be very draining because all they want is to be healed and to move their darkness on top of you. And that's a sick form of worship that often occurs not just in churches, but in many places around the planet. If you conduct healing services, or a healer of some sort, or counselor, you have to be careful about worship with the wrong people that like to have you heal them over and over again, and then decide you're the main point of the darkness for him or her to diffuse into your premises or into your healing center, or whatever it is that you're trying to foster in this life of yours. It's really hard, but this current society of 7-7 like to find somebody to worship so that they can dump their darkness somewhere else. There are big churches that do this very well, and they pour all the darkness of their attendees in their Sunday services. The Catholic Church is pretty good at this, and so are Protestant churches, and so are some other churches that are more spiritual, like in England, where they do seances and other weird things, which might be kind of interesting to those of us who are metaphysical anyway. There are some churches that are also points of darkness that are very deep and disturbing, and all the other church has dumped their darkness into the dark church, and then the priest or minister dies and another one comes in. When the new minister comes in, the polarities can reverse or change. The dark church then turns light and changes all its nature, and then other people find them and it carries on. It's a weirdness of the 7-7 society to have a church associated with light and dark and worship and God and Satan. They don't even include goddess in it because it's all male. There is no female point of power or anything in their thinking of anything that which is kind of weird. Therefore, God is light and Satan is dark, and one church is God. Maybe 1, 2, 3, or 4 or 5 churches are God. Then there's a Satan church that doesn't have any money, is falling apart, and people in the ghetto going to it and sing a lot. In the singing, somehow Satan lives, and sooner or later the minister dies, and then a new minister comes in, and they're all sad and wailing that Mr. Minister died because they loved him. Then Satan leaves, and they all applaud and sing some more, and they remember why you sing in the first place, which is to move the darkness out. There are some songs you can sing along with that moves darkness out. There are songs you can sing along with that do all kinds of things in Shatar land. And that's like James Taylor venue of pop music that began to be produced in the 70s and 80s. They sometimes have an incantation behind it that makes you happy. The first one that started to do that was Frank Sinatra, but if you listen to his music, it's really about sex and nothing else, and nothing really else. Sex can move an assemblage point too, but it's not about reverence, it's about power. So people that want to sit in power often use sexual innuendos here and there, and that makes them feel better, and they can stand in their truth and say what they need to, and so on. One of our associates used that assemblage point for power early in her career as a New Age workshop facilitator. She would make sexual references, and people would laugh and then not know why they laughed because they were funny. But it kept her in her power because it would move her assemblage point into power, so she could channel some resource that liked power, and then everybody would listen. And so that's another kind of assemblage point, and that really has nothing to do with star seed assemblage points, but they are out there if you need them. Most of you are in your own light motion, are well above the assemblage point of power, but for others, if you're entertaining them, it can put you in power to associate in a way that seems kind of sensual or sexual and make jokes around it. But in the assemblage point of reverence, there is no reflection on sexuality. There may be a reflection on sway, which is a very sensual technique for a pair of couples if they are twins to revere each other in the purest way. The twins revere each other in the love of the two. And that for those of you that are in partnership, it's really beautiful to come to that type of sway as frequently as you can. Sometimes tantric puja. If you learn tantra and learn to breathe together and work together in that manner, can lead to a point of reverence as the light begins to flow up the spine and releases the body of its tensions or its need to have sex. Now, having sex isn't wrong, because if you love in the motion of sensual sexuality and playfulness, is still a point not of reverence but of truth. So sexuality for Cs can be about truth, the truth of me for you and you for me. And here in this motion of intimacy, where we caress each other in the bed sheets of ourself, as Shakhtar would say, and have a good roll in the hay and play with ourselves and then be at peace. So that's a point of truth. And the point of truth is one I think we've already spoken to, and that can arise in sexual interplay. But in sensual interplay, a point of reverence can amount, which is about the love of you in the purity of how Spirit sees you, and maybe not your human issues of judgment. So a point of reverence about others takes you to a place where Spirit understands the beauty and grace of each human that incarnates into a very dense place and shapes of big parts of themselves to enter the body, and leaves behind so much of themselves that sometimes it's hard to even imagine who they were before they were born. Your egg knows about this because the egg was shaped and you were shaped to get in a body that ended up in the womb of your mother. It wasn't a very reverent experience of birth either. Spirit was there and thou was there, but the scream of yourself that felt the issues of non-reverence at birth are an issue that you really need to heal within yourself to learn to motion into the assemblage point of reverence. As you heal that initial shock of being born, then generally the assemblage point of reverence begins to flow. Many of you have been working on this in relation to the materials we've provided, and we bless you for that because it's a beautiful thing to understand that healing that initial shock of birth may let go of almost all wounds that you've ever known since, because it's all related. Reverence can't really even begin to flow as an issuance of spirit for blessings until that occurs. And that is very great to understand an issue to work on if you haven't really dealt with your initial birth trauma at this point in time of your life. There are many ways to deal with birth trauma, one of which is known as rebirthing. There may be videos on rebirthing or video workshops on rebirthing. If you feel like you haven't gotten to the basis of what you were traumatized at birth, then perhaps those are good resources to search out, and some practices that may get you motioning your energy in a way that your birth trauma can release. Reverence is a point of sanctuary. Also, in a sanctuary is a revered, reverent temple that is light infused, that surrounds the dwelling or surrounds the church or the sacred sanctuary that you may construct or somebody else may construct. Now, there's sometimes sacred sanctuaries out in nature, and they may be from humans of long ago that anchored something there that is just absolutely amazing, and it remains forever somehow in the strata of the reality of the land. As Serena loves the big island, and there were two little parts that had somehow anchored that kind of reverence, perhaps from kahunas long ago. There were some priests from the Tibetan order that were well revered by many of the Thai people or Asian people from the islands that would come there every spring for a spring retreat. Many people would go to that, and he would sit in that point of reverence and then bring others into it. And it was a very, very beautiful experience for them for that time in his presence. Points of reverence sometimes are also in places that you can never get to because they're in valleys or even under the ocean and left there from long ago and hard to visit because they're not easily accessible. We say 90% of the points of reverence on the earth that were left from peoples of long ago are under the sea, and you can't really feel them if you put the boat on top of it. We're sorry about that, but that's just the way that it is. Now, points of reverence sometimes become botanical gardens. And Serena was very fond of two botanical gardens on Kauai, McBride and Limahuli. They were beautiful points of reverence remaining from other time periods, probably long ago in Atlantean Forum, because they were Atlantean Forum points of reference. There was another 2 or 3 on Maui. One was a lavender garden that harvested a lot of lavender for lavender oil and so on. Another was a botanical garden that was absolutely phenomenal for its flower pictures, and another was a botanical garden on the way to Hana that was more of a Garden of Eden, meaning there were a lot of plants that produced fruit. Per and Asarana have visited all 3 places just to sit in the amazing energies of reverence. While you may have more living points of reverence than most other places, there are 2 in Tahiti and 1 in Bora Bora, and that's about all that we can say about those kinds of Polynesian cultures that not only revered but loved to love, loved to caress, and loved sensuality and sometimes sexuality, and were free to believe in producing a love child and not something else, and were free to believe in many partners if that's what they needed. It was a very, very beautiful culture founded on an Atlantean airstream that incorporated this way and some kinds of reverence that remain into today. Australia had a few, one of which was in the Blue Mountains in a canyon. It became a national park you could visit on a tram to get to the bottom. And that was quite amazing to experience when Asarana and Per were there. There was another one in the rainforest above Brisbane that was absolutely gorgeous, and Asarana is trying to remember the name, but that was a beautiful point of reference in Australia. But there's also Uluru, and that's a beautiful point of reference also to visit if you can. There are no other points of reference on the Australian continent otherwise. Thailand also has 2, and Asarana has never visited there and couldn't explain it too as a result. New Zealand has 1 and is on the South Island, and that's a very beautiful concourse of greenery, I believe. But whatever it is, if you can get yourself to a point of reverence in the physical, that's a very nice thing to do. And often ashrams or some churches do hold the energy, even though they may have an avenue of thinking that doesn't really resonate with you. It's not necessarily a bad thing to go and just sit within them or attend a performance within them or attend something else that you're kind of interested in and see if it's beautiful to you to experience. Some churches do have amazing choral services of sound and song that was written in a spiritual flavor, and sometimes that kind of music can polarize you into the assemblage point of reverence. Sometimes that's true with Tibetan music. The Om is designed to put you in a state of reverence, so you may want to learn to Om now. The Om is a tuning fork for spirit in sound reverberations through the spine. The Om has many expressions in it that are best to learn all expressions and their sequence in order to have it work for you if it can. You can try it if you feel wonderful afterwards. It worked for you. Keep trying it a few times. If it's not right for you, then focus on another kind of music. There is music that can make you feel reverent. Generally, it's acoustic, and it has a top behind it that incantates reverence behind it. It can be very, very beautiful to listen to and motion your assemblage point into reverence. We've got some other pictures here. We're going to have fun. So let me put the first picture up. This is a lovely orchid. All the reverence in flower motions are either lotuses or orchids. Orchid is a plant of reverence, and in Hawaii you find orchids everywhere. They even put orchids on your dinner plate. You can buy a lei of orchids, and the Hawaiian woman would put them behind their ears. Orchid infers reverence in its flower motion, and not necessarily its scent. Although there are some orchids that come from South America that have big scent. There are little ones too that can smell like cocoa or chocolate. The big ones are more like a perfume, and they're really beautiful. The point of reverence of orchid is I am in the reverence of spirit in everything I do, and the Hawaiian people are tuned to this. So they give the tourists orchids on their pillows and on their dining plates, and whenever they can, here and there, and it says, be respectful of our islands. Be respectful of who we are as human beings in an ohana circumstance where we care. Be mindful of our hearts, and be mindful of our truth, and be mindful that you're on sacred land that we preserve in this life of ourselves to be here. Sometimes as a servant, almost because people weren't paid well here. We've lost our land, but we haven't lost our truth, and we haven't lost our song. And so we sing in the hula, and we remind you of who we are as you aren't us. And we need you to go home because we really don't like you living here at all. Now, Asarana didn't feel that way at all during her 18 years of living in Hawaii, because the Hawaiians in the ethereal all thought she was truly Hawaiian, and she's not. She does have primarily Tibetan and Polynesian ancestry, but in any case, in this life, she's born in Vietnam and immigrated to the U.S. at age 10. Due to a large population of Asians living in Hawaii, Asarana has always felt at home during her time there. The Hawaiian ancestors thought of her as Hawaiian, so she was welcome in the land. But if you go to Hawaii as a tourist and you're not looking like a Hawaiian or Asian, generally you're not welcome, and they boot you out of the dream in the land as soon as they can. That's their anthem. This is the nature of transfiguration. When you transfigure yourself into reverence, you will transfigure in yourself into what you need to be in order to be in a sacred space with spirit and all the spirits of the land wherever you're adventuring. In any temple that you may go into, or ashram or church, if it has a reverent point of reference, you have to be one with what is useful in a transfigurative nature to move into the assemblage point of reverence and be welcomed. In reverence, spirit has to welcome you. A spirit won't welcome you for many reasons that are caustic to human consciousness, one of which is consumption of meat. You would think that meat and chicken and all those wonderful things that you may be dining on still, or maybe you don't anymore, and we highly recommend you give them up because they don't light infuse the abdomen very well because they're too dense. Meat produces a smell of rot, and when the spirit gets near your odors of rot in light, it won't want to come near if it smells. There are other foods that really cause a smell to spirit, one of which is garlic. So you need to let go of the garlic and find something else. The other thing that can really be ungracious to spirit is a body that needs to purify or detox itself. So to reach a point of reverence that's more recurrent in your life, you may need to detox if you haven't really done so in this life. If you're younger, it may be easier just to change your diet and eat foods that detoxify the blood that we've spoken to. But if you're older, chances are even you need to choose and fast and change your diet and really motion towards what spirit likes to smell, to retain spirit close to you, to be in a point of reverence more frequently. Spirit likes the smell of fruit. Spirit likes the smell of tofu. Spirit likes the smell of vegetables when they're raw and less so when they're cooked. Sometimes we need cooked vegetables because it helps sustain the blood, but that's what they prefer overall. And then they tend to come close if that's how you order your diet most of the time. They don't care for the smell of cheese, and they don't care for the smell of bread. They really don't care for the smell of most grains, except for rice. And that's kind of odd, but rice produces a sweet odor. They also like the smell of corn or polenta, which is light infused, but not if you eat it too frequently. And so those are the foods that spirit prefers if you're going to stay with them in some way that becomes or grows to be a church of reverence in your life. As Sarana and Pear have done all of that and learned to eat what they say to improve their health or their odors or whatever it is they needed to in order to light infuse. As Sarana is on a rigorous diet that has something to do with emulsifying in a form of light that's very luminescent, but needs a particular spirit to hold it. So she can't really dine on food that spirit doesn't like or it would go away. So she's very careful about that to this day, minding herself. Island people ate way too much pork, and that wasn't good for points of reverence that they try to hold. Sometimes they forget to purify and get quite heavy and almost diabetic by eating too much rice. That's an odd thing in Polynesian biology. The rice might be okay with the fish, but perhaps not the pork. And the poi might be okay with both, and that's maybe where they make a mistake of what's not right for their pancreas. Pork has a substance that is very poisonous to the pancreas. Other meats such as chicken, lamb, and beef are not good for light-infused abdomen. Meat causes abdominal rot and also causes a very noxious smell that spirit doesn't want to be near. And that's just important to get rid of as you light transfuse, because you need spirit to be there for care space and love and sweetness and all the things we like to feel as we dream our lives. So that's the message from this orchid. I have a few more orchids here. This orchid has an amazing perfume that comes from South America, and they are beautiful in their formulas of sweetness. So this type of orchid says that in the reverence you were sweet and be sweet, sweeter and the sweetest that you possibly can be. In this time period, Asarana loved all the plants and blessed all of nature, and the planetary towel would sway with her everywhere she went, because he wanted to teach her about beauty and grace and reverence in nature, and not just in human thinking of Buddha or Kuan Yin or Jesus or any one of these saints that you can name of. There is a grace in spirit and in Baba in human nature, but it was there in nature to be ordered or to be with in a way that was very delicate. And he took her to the most delicate of sways of all, not only in Hawaii, but in Australia, which are the two most beautiful points of swaying with nature that remain on earth to this day. Europe is harsh. Even Iceland is very harsh, for however beautiful the tundra may be. And the gentlest of sway is often in tropical islands that have greenery and palm trees and ferns and perhaps eucalyptus trees and orchids and flowers that bloom naturally, because the weather's warm and the air is moist and it's just pure sweetness in it. And when you go into it and you sway with it, then you grow to be sweet, and that's where he took Asarana and she felt very blessed. So the message of this orchid is, in order to enter a state of reverence, you must be sweet within yourself. So grow to be sweet within yourself now, and let the gases of the body that don't please spirit diffuse outside the walls of your home or wherever you are in this moment, and let them go. When your sweet spirit can descend and want to be near you, the point of being with spirit is to be in love with you and be in love with this life of yours that you're trying to create or cause, and make it as beautiful and gracious and kind to you and to those that you may associate with, because that's the gift of learning the assemblage point of reverence. Reverence has 3 connotations. Orchid will tell you. You want sweet, sweeter, and sweet this, which was a Shatar connotation that Asarana really liked. Then there is another Shatar term of caress in the sweetness and the moment of reverence. You caress spirit and spirit caresses you, and your senses inhale grace, and that's the 3rd point. A grace or a graciousness or something that is just so gentle that nothing is ever disturbed or harmed or injured in any way. This is a planet of deep disturbance, and there's more energy systems that hurt than rekindle. Grace left on the planet. If you master grace, then spirit is there, and thou and thou caress you, because they know sometimes it's hard to be outside in the infrastructure of humans and not kind of get scratched, because the energy systems of most humans scratch. The ones that are gargoyles and jump up and down, they scratch the worst these days. Pear had an encounter of the darkest kind when the barber turned satanic, and Pear didn't know it because 2 months ago his barber was light infused. Yesterday Pear went in to have a haircut, and it was a very weird encounter, because his barber had gone from a place of deep care and some grace to a place of a gargoyle of deep darkness. He was racing around, uncommunicative, had a blank look, and just didn't seem like his usual self. Pear wasn't comfortable in his presence and won't go back to the shop. It's a sway of the changing times that you have to be aware of, because businesses are reversing poles. This used to be a light-infused barber shop, and wherever it is, this shop went as dark as you could get due to whoever owns it. And then the staff turns dark, and that's very gross, but that's happening at this time. So be aware that the points of light you used to enjoy that may have been sweet are now going sour and change directions. So go to those places, those restaurants or stores that are now motioning light, and some of them that used to be medium light you didn't enjoy, or maybe bright light now. That's very confusing to probably the products and the staff alike. And then there's other places that may have been major points of light that are going medium. Some of them may even be going dark, much like Pear's experience with the barber shop yesterday. It's really not a pleasing thing to go into if you are a sea motioning light. This character wasn't a seed, and the young manager that had quit their business along with perhaps 2 or 3 barbers. The young man that was a manager was a seed, and obviously something happened and he had quit, and the whole business rolled into darkness. That was an illustrated point of what's happening in this time of pole reversals. They are not stable, and what was may not be there now or tomorrow. And you need to be careful because it can injure your heart and mind and your spirit to associate with dark businesses. So if you notice people being very agitated and running around in a restaurant, know that that's a gargoyle system. And if there's no light around them, know that they're going into a dark dream stream, and that's probably not a place for you to associate with. We won't say anything more about that, but either Per or Sarana often calls things to himself or herself to illustrate the problems that are going on for humanity. We have another very sacred plant from Hawaii. And let me pull that picture up. This plant, which is known as the tea plant, is considered a very protective plant in Hawaiian culture. And they plant tea plants all around their houses for protection. Some of them are pure green and some of them are pink, red, and green. Tea plant gives off a beautiful gas that does call spirit near like angels that like to protect places. Tea plants also were used in times of medicinal need, and if you cut the tea leaves off and put them on your bed and put your neck on them, they would cool off a high fever. So they used the tea plant leaves to help overcome fevers or malaria on the islands. And the tea leaves would also call in angels who would then start to repair the field of the one that was ill so that they could perhaps recover. But if they couldn't, they would help the person pass, and so it was useful all the way around. Tea plants are probably available in nurseries if you look for them. It may not be a bad thing to have on the premises of your home. Tea plants will tell you that the love of you is in the love of everything. And in the love of everything, there are points of darkness. But if you love the points of darkness, the love will cascade something else into it. And the darkness will shift or move away from whatever you're worried about. And that's the point of reverence. The point of reverence will shut the gates to anything dark in your temple or in your field at the moment that it engages. So, as you motion today into the assemblage point of reverence, there are a lot of gates that are closing that may infiltrate darkness into your light motion of field. Allow them to be permanent in the choice of yourself and ask your Tao, can we keep these sealed maybe forevermore? Because why should we be slung into gates that foster darkness, that don't always leave us feeling well about our lives, of what we're trying to master, what we're trying to do? That's a blessing of the tea plant from Hawaii. It closes gates to hell and darkness and makes sure they stay shut. That may be why the Hawaiians always planted them all around their house. And they're a beautiful plant too. This one is quite sweet, as you can see. Okay, we have one more picture here that's kind of fun. This is a hibiscus flower, and the hibiscus is kind of an interesting tale because the Hawaiian woman who was single would put it behind one ear, and if they were taken, they put it behind the other ear. They picked it off the bush, and it has a long stamen. This one was quite profuse in its ability to say, I am that I am, and I am not you and not anybody else. I'm that I am, and so don't be confused in who you are in the force of yourself. Shift your assemblage point into a point of reverence. And then in the reverence and the blessings and the love, all will be well ahead. That was the message from this hibiscus flower. Hibiscus has another motion in it. The hibiscus flower in and of itself is often made into hibiscus tea. It's a red tea and it's kind of sweet and sour. It is a tea of reverence. So buy some hibiscus tea and enjoy it frequently. It's very healing to the liver, but it's also healing to the body, mind, and spirit. According to a Hispanic man that a runner knew long ago, if you blend the hibiscus leaves in the blender, it makes an excellent hair conditioner because it makes the hair very soft, smooth, and shiny. And that may have been something that the Hawaiian woman knew too long ago when they bathed in the streams and used this flower for something beautiful for their hair and their skin. Hibiscus has another notion about procreation, meaning that the abundance in the seeds of yourself, and toss them merrily everywhere you can, in that they was have as many children as you can. But in this day of light motion, that's probably not the best choice for any human civilization because light doesn't need too many humans. That's one of the problems with the planetary infrastructure at this time and why it's going so gray. There are too many humans on the surface, and they've damaged too many of the natural world wonders with their need to deforest and build too many cities that then sit as death gates literally on the planet. Any major city is literally the death gate, and that's a problem for people living too close to the infrastructure of a major city with too many high-rises in this time period, because it's just filled with death sequences, which lead to hell and lead to big darkness, perhaps bigger than the planet can handle in too many points of the major cities all around the earth. So Hibiscus said to Asarana, never live near a big city. If you have to travel through the airports and don't stay in the cities any longer because they're going to be too dark for your health or your mind or your body even in transit. Even in Iceland, when Asarana and Per visited about a year ago, is also becoming dark. It's because of its high rise. For however beautiful it was in light, it's sinking at this time in energy systems. And that's a very sad thing to witness after having seen it at some point in its beauty and its grace before that action began to take place. We can't help these global quagmires of polarity reversal that says, if you're dense, you're going to go dark, and if you're non-dense, you're going to stay light. And if you're really non-dense and purified, you're going to be midpoints of light. And most of those are in the natural world tundra of wilderness where not many humans traverse anymore. The mountains can go very bright, and they can also go very dark sometimes if the infrastructure of mineral transfuses into gray matter light. Now granite does not transfuse. In gray matter light, some salts of the sea do, but the gray matter light appears to be collecting at the base of the sea, is not rising as much, and maybe that's better for those that are living near the sea. The land can produce gray matter light if it has a compound in it that is a salt that's particularly substance in lead. So salt with lead is the blend that they're looking at that causes gray matter light. And of course, we know that there's lead in the air from the use of petroleum products, probably lead in the land from petroleum wastes. That's why you wouldn't want to wear polyester, because it's like putting on that, so we wouldn't recommend you wearing that ever. It's not going to emulsify light. So the region you want to live should be as pure as it can be in order to foster a state of reverence in this life of yours ahead. There are always beautiful places to visit and beautiful places to take yourself that may feel reverent, as you look at the beauty and grace of the natural world, tundra that exists within it. I would say if a place makes you feel reverent, visit it frequently and allow yourself into that action because you clean up your energy systems and diffuse a lot of patterns you're trying to transfuse through in order to let them go and be more peace. Understand that in any week you go through things you're trying to diffuse, and they may be grungy and icky and yucky to feel. And so that is, but if you can enter a point of reverence, however you mean to do in that moment and in that motion, you may release everything suddenly of the back of you and start to feel grand again and remember who it is in the I am that you are that took this body in the first place as an incarnation of your life form, okay? As a runner will tell you that sometimes Vietnamese restaurants are a beautiful point of reverence. Vietnam is perhaps one of the major eastern points of reverence, whereas Hawaii is the major western. In Vietnam, there's a graciousness and a gracefulness, and often Vietnamese people who open these restaurants put all these statues of Kuan Yin and Buddha in them and try to hold sacred space. You can really feel the reverence in their food and in the establishment. Now, it's not true of all of them, but it can be true of maybe one in your neighborhood, and perhaps that would be worthwhile locating there to feel reverent and let go of those things that bother you in any given week. The other type of restaurant that can also hold points of reverence are Indian cuisine. Some Indian restaurants may be very reverent and others not, so you have to be selective about which one you go to, but you feel it in the food because you inhale it as a flower, and sometimes you can't stop eating it because it just feels so glorious to eat reverent food. The last thing we'll tell you is that you can cook your food in reverence if you can shift your point of assemblage into reverence before you start to cook your meal. You cook the reverence of spirit into matter, into your food, and that's a beautiful thing to gift yourself if you can. Asarana was very pleased to cook a black paneer, which is a spinach dish with baba. He told her just how to cook it with coconut milk and how to put it into the frying pan in a particular sequence, and later some baked potatoes that she blended up in an Indian curry that came out of the jar, freshly ground and not powdered. The meal turned out so incredible because of the motions of reverence she was in as she cooked it, that it changed the point of assemblage in her refrigerator to store what was remaining and put it into the ice box. It just shifted everything in the kitchen, and she needed to do that, and that's why he took the time to cook with her that particular day. Food can attract a lot of dark energies because it's still filled with slaughter thought stream from the grocery marketplace. If you can go to a grocery marketplace that is mostly fruit and vegetables, and I know sometimes they have beautiful vegetable stands in some parts of the world. Canada was that way. Australia was that way. If there is no meat, it's far better to try to shop there if you can, because it has no point of mutilation within it. And if there's a point of mutilation, it can even come through grains or other things you're not expecting. That's what had happened with some grains that Asrana had bought. It had a mutilated energy in it, and in cooking the meal in reverence, it caused the mutilated energies to move out of their kitchen and out of their refrigerator. Mutilated energies cause spirit to abate because they can't handle it. They get destroyed, and that's one of the reasons the point of reverence is so important to each of you as starseeds. It's a place to motion so you can be close to spirit and receive their healing, receive their love and care, receive their sweetness and their softness, and not worry about your life anymore, because they'll co-dream your dreams with you in a way that align in a certain level of abundance. So learning to be more frequently in a state of reverence does lead to abundance, because spirit will come and issue a dream that is a reflection of the care of you for them and the care of them for you, and that may motion away dreams of failure or dreams of lack or dreams of problems that you may not be expecting when you enter a point of reverence in any given week. It is best to try to get to a point of reverence at least once per week to realign your dreams. So anything you can do that puts you into that reverence is very useful unto you, and some music may cause you to go there and sway there with its musical playings if they can roll into your room or your home. Some restaurants may feel very reverent, or some churches or temples or places you could visit, or parks that remind you to be reverent. And we would say go there and put yourself there at least once a week so you can let go of the darkness and bring spirit closer to gift to you the beauty and grace of the dreams you would really like to create in this life of yours. We would say one more point to all of that is that spirit does have a natural need to be near what is sweet, So if you fast on a given day, maybe just on water or on juices that are sweet, that will call spirit closer to you the day to follow. So think about that too. Perhaps fast on a Friday and get to a beautiful park of reverence or a place of reverence the day to follow, and then spirit is more attractive to come and aid you because you cleansed the blood and the mind in the field of what is mutilated in consumption theory of humankind. Consumption is that we have to choose something. Drinking fluid is non-consumptive, and you can drink as much as you want and never be in consumptive energies. That's how Asarana was trained. If she had to fast, she fasted on all these things, including soup at the end of the day, along with smoothies, juices, soy milk, and almond milk. She heated up into a kind of dessert with a little stevia, and she never felt empty at all. Living that way sometimes for a month at a time, and she learned it healed the abdomen, and she learned that spirit really came close because she really smelled a lot sweeter as a result of consuming fluids. It cleansed the blood, and it was just beautiful for her. And so you can think about that too, that a point of reverence is something to be cleansed into as you're the sacred temple of you. Your body is your sacred temple, and if you don't think of it that way, then maybe it's time to rearrange your assemblage point of how you view the physical. Because if you trash the physical, you trash you. But you also trash what isn't going to ever be well with spirit, meaning that they need you to love you and treat yourself as the divine temple in the physical. And then they can oscillate a direction to come and be with you in the dreams of your life. There's many circumstances that are very irreverent, one of which is often in the workplace or the marketplace. Some restaurants may feel reverent, as Asarana has described, but most don't because they're in consumptive theory and so doesn't appeal to spirit at all. Nature is different, and so perhaps it's better to take your smoothie on the road and get out into nature, or take a little picnic of something that's well, like fruits or juices, and see what that does for your spirit into matter in a day of reverence with nature. Because nature still holds reverence, and butterflies are one kingdom that often is thought of as reverent in the history of the planet. Butterflies of all colors and sizes and shapes that are light on their wings, and they drink sap out of a honey from the flowers so they're not consumptive at all. They're thought as the one insect kingdom that is a point reverence. For the animal kingdom, it is the birds that generally hold a point of reverence. Finches are one bird that they think of as reverent, and they eat seeds and not worms. There are other kingdoms that are not thought of as reverent at all, which is mostly the four-legged, because they may consume grass, but in the end, sometimes they're consumed by humans. That's very sad, and it puts the assemblage point of mutilated dreaming onto their kingdoms, and then they start to go extinct. There's hardly one animal that humans haven't tried to eat at some point, and that's very sick, but it's a very sick society with a very low mentality about what needs to be. So if you're going to remain in a place with spirit, because spirit doesn't think in terms of greed or of mutilated theory, it thinks in terms of love and blessing and honoring everything alive and all that is and all that has ever been through time. That's what the assemblage point of reverence leads you to. You love yourself, you love everything you've experienced, you love each you've known, even the ones that have stepped on your toes, and forgive them. You love the one you're near, you love the people you sway with, you love God, Goddess, all that is, Tao and Tao and Spirit, and you love everything that ever was and ever could be in a creation somewhere that maybe was more beautiful than Earth. But you also love it here as a creation that's fallen and was once a reverent temple to a Tao formation on the sixth dimension. So Earth lost its reverence a long time ago as it fell from dimension 6 to dimension 5. In dimension 5, she became a star that fostered angels for a time until it fell again to dimension 4, where it fostered humans who were reverent for a time because they reflected on things more. Then it fell to dimension 3.5 and spawned this creation called Atlantis. Atlantis was reverent of partnership and sometimes nature, and that was okay. And now we fell into another civilization where reverence isn't here much at all. That's a sad thing, but that's what happens when planets fall and continue to carry life upon them, especially human life. So bless it and forgive it, and know that you're not this current culture. You are a star seed, and being inhumane or irreverent or not choosing to bless everyone and everything that you know doesn't need to be the stanza of your reality that you choose to create for you. You can be beautiful in you as you bless everyone and see something about them that's admirable, something that they're attempting in themselves to foster and perhaps encourage them to go do something beautiful for themselves if they seem unwell. That's the reverent human as a guide or a force for spirit to say everything is a choice. Do you want to choose to be sick? Do you want to choose to be ugly? Do you want to choose to be unwell? Or do you want to choose to be beautiful? And what do you need to do to be beautiful in you and be sweet and caressed and share in the grace of spirit? What do you need to do is all up to you, and it is a free will planet. And that's the issue, even if reverence is a choice. If you don't choose for it, it will never be. If you do, it may be a beautiful place to sway and heal and caress and love. And if you can join some others in the same point of assemblage, then perhaps a beautiful sway of a cantina of the two or the three or the many. And so we leave you with these thoughts, that the assemblage point of reverence is an issuance of self that fosters itself in yourself to align the dreams of spirit into matter in a beautiful stream of pure care of all that is. That's our prose for you today, and understand that it's a self-striation that comes in your field as you shift your assemblage point into reverence. Assemblage point shifts, the self turns, and an issuance of a striation is added to the field to allow you to sit in the reverence of a self-reality that is here, that allows spirit to descend and bless you and caress you and be with you and heal you while you love and bless in return. There's no way to be in reverence without loving and blessing spirit or anyone that is near. So you need to be cognizant of the truth that it can't be a one-way street or the point of reverence, and the descent of spirit into matter will be cut short. It needs to be a two-way street of I love you and you love me and we love each other, and I love the angels and each spirit that chooses to be here in this motion of reverence of my heart. And so we bless you and caress you today through this webinar. We thank you for attending and we wish you well. I believe that we are through, and we just say aloha and also namaste.